to the Goot Reaction. I'm your host, Joe Goot, and with me, as always, is my main man from the Midwest. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about Trump's top donor list, some of his initial cabinet picks, and then we'll see where we go from there. I know in one of our recent podcasts, we said that, we're probably not going to dwell on politics too much for a little while or try to steer clear and maybe give ourselves some time to breathe, some time to think and all that. But honestly, it's just kind of difficult to stay away from it as a general topic, and we felt like this information was good to get out there and just to share. And again, not in the spirit of being a sore loser or being just down and out, but just trying to discuss the information as it stands. And then especially with the donors, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the connections between the donors and potential policy goals that you might see in a second term. And then with Trump's cabinet picks, just wanted to analyze a little bit of what's been out there so far and what that might mean and what that says about his goals and what a second term might look like. So with that being said, again, just trying to come at this from as objective as possible angle and just see what we get up to talking about. So with that being said, we'll dive into the donor side of things first. And I pulled this information from Open Secrets, which is an awesome site that tracks as much as possible anyway, the donors to individual campaigns and to the different PACs and all that kind of stuff. And there's still a ton of dark money out there that is, by its very nature, untrackable. But again, did some research to try to uncover some information on who might be behind these individual companies and individual foundations, for example. So let's dive in there. And to start with, the biggest Trump donor was Timothy Mellon, by far, coming in at $150 million. And so that's just one person. That's not a company or a foundation or anything. That's just one dude dropping 150 mil right off the top. And what's funny is when you look back at his past and his past political activity, there really isn't a whole lot there prior to like 2016, 2015. He really wasn't. I mean, we're talking like in the thousands of dollars, not in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So somewhere along the line, he decided to go in with both feet. And really, that was the 2020 election when he donated $60 million to the Trump campaign, which again pales in comparison to the $150 million this time around. And there's really not a ton of information about this guy. He's like one of those quiet billionaires who just prefers to stay out of the limelight. And I was doing some reading around how he really doesn't even like to always like meet the people he's donating to. And so he's not one of those out and about partiers or guys that likes to rub elbows with people and be famous for the sake of being famous. So he's kind of behind the scenes guy. And he's, of course, the inheritor of the Andrew Mellon legacy and fortune, who was one of the Gilded Age mega industrialists from the East Coast or from the Northeast anyway. And so, yeah, so 150 million. What we know about him outside of just some basic facts is that he is a racist. In his book, he was talking about how Black people are lazy and aggressive, and if you give them welfare or other social programs, they're just going to become more lazy and entitled and that kind of thing. So he stands by what he wrote in that book. And what I'm thinking that he's looking for with this donation to Trump is pretty much dismantling social programs in favor of to pay for the tax cuts that Trump already put through in 2017 and wants to extend this coming term. So it feels like that's where he's coming from primarily. He seems like one of those libertarian guys who just wants to be left alone and swim in his swimming pool full of dollar bills and, doesn't want any taxation, doesn't want any social programs that actually help people. He's just like, I want to make my money and, screw the rest of the world kind of thing. So that's what I'm seeing with him. That's just, of course, that's just my take on it. But um, I don't know. Have you heard anything about Timothy Mellon or any of the stuff around his big money donation this time around?
I'd heard the name, but I really hadn't, really didn't know a lot of details.
Okay.
So that's interesting. I pictured Scrooge McDuck when you mentioned him swimming
Uh-huh.
around in his, his vault of gold coins.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty much seems like that's the type of dude that he is. So, like I said, just not a ton of information out there on him, but even his family doesn't seem to be particularly fond of him, from what I've read. And they were kind of throwing him under the bus in terms of like how he really just doesn't want to help anybody or do anything good for society. Just kind of keep his billions. One interesting thing too I saw was that the estimates of his fortune are like very wildly. Like I've seen as much as like 14 billion is still left from the family fortune, as to as little as like one to 2 billion. So it's more than likely somewhere in between. If he's down to 1 billion and he's donating 150 million for a single campaign, that doesn't seem too smart. Not all billionaires are as smart as we like to think they are, though. So
But
I
he's
don't know. It
trying,
could
but he's
be,
trying to hang on to that money with those tax cuts and
yeah,
with everything else. So
yeah, yeah,
if I just go by what you described, what I'm picturing is, and again, I don't know a lot about the guy, but didn't didn't do a lot for his money. Was
nope.
happy to have it. Probably as a kid, maybe didn't need to associate with anybody that he didn't want to. So that makes it easy to have opinions about other people who you don't know much about. But
Hmm.
again, I'm just riffing off of a few lines of notes here that I took while you were talking. So
Yeah, yeah. I would say. I mean, that's I could be a very accurate, read on it, and also it could be again one of those just like Elon Musk types who's just not very socially adept and has always been in a bubble kind of thing, and so he just didn't have to learn those skills, and so just wants to be alone with his money, and that's what makes him happy. So,
but
and it also could be too like his predecessor, uh, Andrew Mellon, was also I think Secretary of the Treasury. I think in the 20s, in the 30s, early 30s. So, and he was really pushing to like get rid of estate taxes, and he wanted to find a way to leave his mega wealth to his family without tax implications. And so there's in that family there's a long history of
that
trying to avoid taxes
yeah,
and regulation and that kind of thing.
that kind of activity, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but we have to say, like you said, there's not a lot of information on the guy, so we
Mm-hmm.
really don't know the guy. But we're
Yep.
just putting a couple clues together.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So, since we don't know as much about him, let's move on to number two on the list, which surprisingly is number two, honestly, Elon Musk. And when you look at Open Secrets, though, it actually lists the number two donor as SpaceX, which I think is kind of funny. But that's how you'll see that later in the list, too, how sometimes there will be a company that's on the list, but isn't really like the company. Um, because company apparently like organizations like that, companies can't donate directly to candidates. So what you'll have is what they say is like it's the officers and employees of the company making the donation. So it's not officially from SpaceX, but really it's from Elon Musk. We all know that. And he came in at $118 million that we know about for this election cycle. And of course, the big thing there is that he also leveraged. Well, another big thing there, I should say first, is that he leveraged uh, his platform X, formerly known as Twitter, to try to influence things as much as possible, as much as they sort of deny that. I think that's unmistakably true, based on the way he's manipulated the algorithms and stuff to show his posts to every single user on the platform, and how just in general the overall consensus is that it's become kind of a right-wing cesspool since he bought it a couple years ago. And so I don't think that's any accident that you have his purchase of the platform and then his rise into more of a public facing role in the political scene. So I don't think that's any surprise at all.
Yeah.
Any initial thoughts there?
I read something too that said after he endorsed Trump, like how much Twitter promoted either his tweets or about Trump or just pro Trump stuff in general, just like skyrocketed. Like
Mm-hmm.
it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so it's, probably no coincidence there. And listen,
Yeah.
I'm going to call it Twitter because I don't care if it wants to identify as something else. I'm going to call it what it was born as. And that's just how it is.
Touche. Yeah. So
Totally joking there, everybody.
yeah. I know we're only about 12 podcast episodes in, and you don't know Triple M the way I do, but yeah, totally joking there. So let's think a bit about this for a minute. What does Elon want out of this? Why did he put in 118 million? And I mean, we're already starting to see this picture unfold. It's not any kind of super mystery or anything. He's already been appointed to this faux government agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, which of course is an acronym. The acronym for that is Doge, which anybody that knows Elon Musk at all knows that he's obsessed with the Dogecoin, which is a crypto meme coin that some people made a lot of money on. Most people probably lost money on, unless you got in on it way, way, way early. But he is a big crypto nerd. He was also, I think, way out over his skis on this. Apparently, like, this is a position that has no pay and is outside of the government. And of course, that's for an agency that doesn't exist yet. So I don't know how, they'll probably figure something out with that. But this way, I guess he doesn't have to divest, because that wouldn't be normally a conflict of interest, and therefore require him to, divest or put his fortune in like a blind trust. And so he can't actively have a leadership position in the government as well as continue running his businesses. But on the other hand, in Trump's first term, he didn't really divest. He just gave leadership of his companies over to his sons, and he was still making millions and millions and millions of dollars while he was running the government. So, I mean, ethics be damned when it comes to Trump, honestly. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some way that Musk did have a position of influence and still kept his companies. That wouldn't be a shocker.
Well, not only is he going to keep his company, but I believe he is the beneficiary of several lucrative government contracts related to SpaceX.
Oh, billions. I think he's the top government contractor.
Yeah, probably Starlink
outside of the Defense Department.
Yeah, probably Starlink in some ways, when you figure the internet access it gives to certain places. And let me guess, nothing related to any of that will be cut through any efficiency measures. That he'll have direct decision making in. So it doesn't seem like it's hard to see to follow the breadcrumbs on this one, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's not just government spending, it's government regulation too, which, you've got a guy that is playing around in industries where regulation is extremely important from a safety perspective, self-driving cars, anyone. But then also, so it's not just the spending, it's not just the lucrative opportunities that he's going to have from a spend perspective, a government spend perspective, but it's also the regulations that are overseeing his current companies that he could start meddling with.
add in pollution from factories, and
Oh yeah.
I'm sure those rockets aren't exactly a clean machine as they're launching into space. I mean, there's all kinds of things there. I'm sure he's be happy to work around.
hmm Well, think of all the raw materials for all the batteries and the raw materials for the fuel for his rockets, and like just the extraction methods around those, and
Oh yeah, heavy mining.
countries,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the countries that we can and can't do business with based on conflict zones and that kind of thing. Like all that could just totally go out the window, and it could just be a total free for all there. So yeah. So I think that one is also now becoming fairly obvious what Musk wants out of that. Also, I've been reading a lot of different things here and there, and watching videos around how he's also starting to kind of annoy people in the
I was gonna say,
administration.
I wondered if that's where you were going.
Yeah. And even Trump had to go out of his way to humiliate him on stage and at some event, saying something like, "Elon won't. I can't get rid of this guy," and just to put him in his place a little bit and show him who has the real power, um, at least in Trump's mind, anyway. But yeah, it's kind of funny that he's this close, trusted advisor, and now he's like just some like annoying hanger on at Mar-a-Lago, and he won't leave, and but he's got so much money, and Trump needs the money, so he knows that he's pretty much got carte blanche to do it and say what he wants to say, and he's acting like he's the co-president, whether Trump wants him to or not. So
So as we bring this kind of stuff up, my question would go out to any diehard Trump supporter out there. Just I'm not trying to pick. I'm just trying to ask an honest question. What do you think "drain the swamp" meant? And this is the swamp. This level of pay to play, um, quid pro quo. You know, this is corruption at its finest.
mhm.
This is the swamp. What did you think? What did you think that meant when Trump said that? When he said he wasn't, he didn't need anybody else's money and he wasn't for sale. I beg to differ based on this information. What did you think he
Yeah,
meant? Again? I'm going to go back to our post-election episode. Are you willing to hold the man accountable for his actions? Is this what you wanted? Maybe
yeah,
it is. I don't know. I still, still trying to answer the question in my brain why he got more votes than somebody else did. But
yeah,
I don't know. Is it just ask yourselves? Is this what you wanted? Is this what you think during the swamp meant?
yeah. I mean, did you really want Elon Musk as co-president? Because I sure as hell did. I mean, I didn't vote for Trump anyway, but if I had, I would be voting for the guy, not his mega wealthy entourage to be deciding what happens in this country. Like, you know, we elect officials. We don't, but unfortunately, we don't get to pick who is in the cabinet, and that's why we're going through this list. So we'll go through some of the cabinet picks, and in terms of corruption, man, we're just getting started. So hang on to your hat.
Yeah. I mean, 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of these people voting for Trump, if you don't have a problem with Elon, I mean, a lot of these same people thought he was some hippie, do-gooder, greeny wannabe because he was building electric cars. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And how quickly that has
Yep.
changed.
Yep. Yeah. So, so there's Elon, and we could go on about him for a while, but I think everyone at least has a basic understanding of what he's about. And so he's number two on the list. Number three is Miriam Adelson at $100 million, and I believe it was again listed on Open Secrets as a foundation that she's the head of, but essentially Miriam Adelson, which is Sheldon Adelson's widow, and in the past several election cycles, they had contributed about the same amount, so their running totals probably about 300 million, give or take, invested in Trump's election campaigns. So this time around, 100 million, and basically what that comes down to is she just wants to run Israeli policy. And last time around, He moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, which caused a big stir. Not a popular move amongst the other nations in the area, and especially the Arabs and Palestinians in the area. He basically said settlements, A-OK, you know, you don't have to worry about international oversight on that. And then one of the other big ones was allowing or recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel, which is actually Syrian territory. So he just unilaterally said, hey, uh, Miriam and Sheldon want it, so we're going to give the Golan Heights to Israel, which is something he didn't have the power to do. But a U.S. president recognizing that officially is a huge deal. So that was another thing on the policy wish list from the Adelsons before this election. And so this time around, I think the big focus is going to be on annexing the West Bank and basically allowing Israel to just take as much land as they possibly can through the pretext of defending themselves against these other Middle Eastern in these Middle Eastern conflicts. So with her 100 million, she's basically buying his Israel policy. Is what my opinion is on that.
Seen a lot of videos recently of people, usually of, some Muslim background, saying they couldn't vote for Kamala. And in a lot of cases, they just said they didn't vote, right? But they couldn't vote for Kamala because of the genocide in Gaza. And listen, I can understand that. But if you don't think that the choice there was still better than somebody who will basically let Israel do what they want, then, I don't know. There was some video I saw about, I don't know, it was maybe about a week and a half ago. It was, I think, a Georgia congresswoman, who was, she was either Palestinian or I apologize, I don't remember exactly, but she kind of said something to that effect, right? Like you might not like what's happening, but the choice is still pretty clear in the long term of what you hope to get out of Middle East relations and things, and the choice would still be to vote Kamala. So, I mean, again, I respect everybody's choice, but again, I can't imagine if what you're saying holds when they annex West Bank, and I can't imagine that's at the end of the day what anybody wanted, right?
No, yeah,
it's just I hope not, but again, I think that just people think about this over the next 4 years, and when it comes time to vote again, right? Actually, let me pause on that. 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years, we can hope for some change.
Yep, that's true. And I'll put a lot of that on Kamala Harris, though, because she had an opportunity to distance herself from Biden's policies in Israel, and she didn't. And I think that was a huge miss.
Fair.
I'm not just saying that that's all it was, because she was in a tough spot, still being the vice president and stuff, so she still had to kind of toe the official line. But I think she could have done better there and made it more clear that she would reevaluate and she would handle things a little bit differently. I think she still could have said something along those lines, and but she was just kind of issuing normal talking points and didn't really want to rock the boat against Biden's policy there, and I think that definitely cost her.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, if the United States has that much influence, though, which it seems like we still do in a lot of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't there some way we could have supported our ally, but also said, look, we're not going to stand for genocide?
Yeah.
I mean, both things can be true. Like, we're not going to continue to arm you to murder people, but you're our ally. You know what I mean? And why don't we, hey, you and I are friends. I'd hope if you were going to do something dumb, I could talk you out of it. you know what I mean? Like, or vice versa,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could still say, okay, we're going to make sure you have all the stuff you need to run the Iron Dome and actually defend yourself in the country, but we're not giving you 2,000-pound bombs anymore. We're not giving you these long range drones. We're not, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to be intelligence sharing about, stuff going on in Gaza. Like, there's a point where you can just say, defend yourself, yes. The offensive aggression, no. And you could make that distinction. And I think a lot of people would understand that and be better with that than the alternative.
I mean, we're not always good examples of that ourselves, though, right? I mean,
No.
we got attacked on 9/11, and it was tragic, absolutely tragic. But then we go fight a 20-year war in Afghanistan and a whatever 10, 12-year war or however long it was in Iraq to, to sort of respond to that. Now, I don't think we were as, from what I hear anyway, I mean, I don't think we were as blatantly aggressive necessarily. We had a presence to try to, in our crude justification to try to keep the peace, establish democracy, whatever. I don't think we were, like I said, quite as aggressive as I think Israel's being in Gaza. But I would just, like I said, we're not a great example of how to, respond to, this similar situation.
Yeah, agreed. Just with the duration and the scope of the Iraq War, hundreds of thousands of civilians died in that, and
for sure.
Yeah, and we should have never been in Iraq. So, yeah,
well,
so that's a good example.
Yeah, you really add in that we had no business there.
Yeah. So that makes it doubly disturbing. But you're right. Yeah, we are not infallible by any means. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, so moving on, we have America First at $21 million. And so America First is, I think, it's a dual, like it's one of those where they have multiple things going on. They have like a policy institute, they have a PAC, et cetera, et cetera. And the interesting thing there is Linda McMahon, who is of the WWE fame, Linda and Ed McMahon, not Ed McMahon,
Vince.
Vince, thank you. God, Ed McMahon. Where did that come from? How old am I? Anyway.
Here's Johnny.
So anyway, Linda and Vince McMahon, and I believe they're separated. They're no longer together. But Linda McMahon is actually on the board of the America First Policy Institute. And surprise, surprise, Trump just nominated her to be the Secretary of Education. So your organization donates $20 million plus to the Trump campaign, and oh hey, look at that, you get to be the Secretary of Education, which, going from co-running the worldwide wrestling, or what the hell does WWE stand for?
World Wrestling Entertainment or something.
Okay.
They had to give up the WWF because it was actually owned by the World Wildlife Federation, I believe, or something that. So they switched to WWE. Not that I'm a fan. I just, it's just some of that useless knowledge that stayed in my brain.
Well, hell, I used to be. I mean, I remember my dad and I and my brother we used to watch wrestling all the time back when it was like.
Oh yeah, back
cool.
in the day, the Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah, man. Jake the Snake and Sergeant Slaughter and like all the, like when you actually had creative personas and stuff and you had really cool storylines. So anyway, yeah, I mean we loved watching that stuff. But
there was the cartoon. You remember the cartoon? We're gonna date ourselves here, but
I mean that stuff was great, but you go from running, co-running the WWE to getting yourself a Secretary of Education position. And that speaks to what we'll get to here in a little bit, which is the some of the cabinet picks. But my God, I mean, and so to be honest, to be fair, I have not done a deep dive into Linda McMahon. So she might have some background that I don't know about that makes her qualified. But just from what I do know, I'm guessing that's not the case, and I'm guessing it's the $21 million that her organization donated to Trump's campaign that got her the pick, not some hidden, secret, public education advocacy that she's done in the past.
Yeah, I'm real open to the idea that there's a lot of just really smart people, and their skill set exceeds their experience in that just because they've worked
Mm-hmm.
in a given industry or something doesn't mean they're not a really smart person who can tackle a challenge and do really well because they just understand how to break down problems and what makes sense. It's kind of like we talked about the one episode where, Obama needed, I'm drawing a blank on his name now, Biden's first chief of staff, Ron Klain,
Oh yeah,
to
McLean.
run the
Yeah, or
Ebola
Klain.
response just because he needed
Yeah.
somebody to manage that process. He didn't need a medical person. He just needed somebody that was smart and good at, managing complex situations like that. So I'm all for the idea that people can step out of certain roles and maybe step into other roles and have a good impact. But like you said, we don't know her experience. The 21 million, the fact that she was a donor says a lot. I would be curious her stance on education because last time around it was freaking Betsy DeVos who was a clear like opponent of public education, thought private
Mm-hmm.
education was the answer to everything. Like so. I would like to find out more about what her stance is. She clearly runs an
Yeah.
organization where people get beat in the head for a living, and so I don't know if that what that says, but anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, we're all for keeping an open mind and being open to that option that she maybe does have the skills and leaves the policy recommendations to people that know what they're doing and have experience in that field. That's the hope anyway. So
I mean, the idea of experience for the job is not going to come out as you go through this list of cabinet picks, right?
right. Yeah, don't hold your breath on any of that. That's for sure. So another donor coming in at 21 million was Building America's Future, which is just Elon Musk's PAC that he put together. So his grand total so far is 139 million. Um, Another top donor was Hendricks Holding Company at 15 million, and Open Secrets listed two of the sub companies under there, which is Hendricks Commercial Properties and Blackhawk Transport. Um, Both of those were owned by Diane Hendricks, and basically, overall, the Hendricks Holding Company is owned by Diane Hendricks, who Forbes declared the richest self-made woman 7 years in a row now. And she also donated to Marjorie Taylor Greene's campaign. She's a big Republican donor overall, and she's worth about 11 billion as of 2021, which means, given the stuff that we talked about before, how between 2020 and 2024 billionaires basically doubled their net worth. I'm guessing she's worth well above the 11 billion as of 2024.
I'm sorry, did you say that happened during the Biden administration? I'm just trying to,
Yes.
yeah, because when the economy was dog shit,
Yeah. Economy was
billionaires.
crap.
I mean, again,
Mm-hmm.
sarcasm, right? Billionaires doubled their net worth, so that's
Uh-huh.
just
Yeah.
can't drive that point home enough there.
And what's interesting about her and her company is that it has it has tendrils like everywhere. So the two that were listed on Open Secrets were a commercial real estate company out of Wisconsin, and that's where she's based, and then Blackhawk Transport, which is a trucking company, which started small and grew to be massive, and I think has a countrywide footprint. And then also, if I go a little further down the list, there's ABC Supply, which donated 10 million, and that's another Diane Hendricks owned company that is the country's largest building supply firm. So I haven't looked at for this episode. I just looked at Trump's top donors, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I didn't see ABC Supply on the Kamala Harris list because because of all the talk about trying to increase the housing supply, trying to build 3 million units, trying to stimulate, fair and affordable housing. And with her being one of the major suppliers in the country, I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't double dip there in those campaign contributions, at least with that company.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon
No, it's not. Yeah,
for
that's
big
true.
donors to go both ways right there. A lot of Wall
Yep.
Street will do that. Will donate to both
Hmm.
sides because at the end of the day, well, I mean, why do they do that? Because no matter who wins, they want to have been remembered as somebody who contributed. So,
Bingo.
even if it's not so obviously rewarded through like cabinet picks and things like that, there is some, like I said, kind of the pay to play that goes
Hmm.
on both sides. I know we talked about it in some other discussion. That yeah, both sides do it. We acknowledge
Yep.
that. It's like blatant front and center now. Again, for somebody
Yeah.
who was going to drain the swamp and didn't need anybody else's money.
Right. Right. Okay, so we have Hendricks Holding Company at 15. Then we go on to Bigelow Aerospace, which this one's a little interesting because they donated 14 million, and they're actually a defunct aerospace company that was making like space modules for like the International Space Station, and the dude was trying to build like a space hotel, trying to sell 3-day stays for 5 mil. But it collapsed in 2020, and Robert Bigelow is the guy who founded Bigelow Aerospace, and he's the owner of Budget Suites. So he's a hotelier, and he, rather than donate directly, this is what's interesting about it, because Bigelow Aerospace is a defunct company, but that's the entity through which these donations were made. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another couple of interesting things was that Bigelow also donated 10 million to the DeSantis Florida governor reelection campaign, and then 25 million to I've never heard of this guy before, but Joe Lombardo. He was running for Nevada governor, and that's Bigelow's home state. So he really was putting a lot of money behind trying to get this Joe Lombardo into the governorship there. And then finally, and I think this is the most fun fact, is that he is a big believer in UFOs and has started a research foundation to discover or to do research into consciousness after death. So the dude has some interesting pastimes and interests outside of politics.
Those last two I could actually, kind of get into, man.
Right.
Be interested to find out some of that. But yeah, that I don't know, man. When you said earlier that companies aren't even supposed to be able to donate money, and now you got one that's defunct, that's still
Yeah.
managing to. So is it like because the company maybe is defunct, but the entity still exists, so it technically can donate money?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think it would have that kind of money on any kind
Right.
of books to be able to do that with. I mean, the system just seems to be getting just more and more broken.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why that can happen, honestly. It's very strange. So yeah, so there's him coming in at 14 million. At 13 million, you have the Laura and Isaac Perlmutter Foundation, or Perlmutter. Not sure how to pronounce that. Apologize. This guy Ike is the former CEO of Marvel, and he tried to get on the Disney board, um, but failed to get a seat, and so he sold all his $3 billion worth of Disney shares in protest, basically. So he's worth about $5 billion, and he's a former unofficial advisor to Trump's first term over at the Veterans Administration. So he already has experience with the Trump administration. I don't know if he's hoping for another role. Now the foundation that they run is supposed to be all about societal good and all that. And I think they ran the money through there just because it's a nonprofit, and so some type of tax dodge to get for those contributions. And it's hard to say, both with that with Laura and Ike and with Robert Bigelow. It's hard to really say. I mean, you could see maybe with Bigelow being involved in the space industry, at least nominally now. I mean, without that company being active, but maybe he's he's used a SpaceX flight to put his capsule up on the ISS, and so maybe there's something there that he just wants more government contracts, or he wants to revitalize the company, maybe bring it back and partner up with SpaceX, or maybe just get in front of Elon and have Elon try to throw some money around at him. And then with Ike Perlmutter, I don't know, it seems like he was already just a friend of, political ally of Trump's, and had already had a spot in the government in his first term. So maybe he was just ideologically aligned, and wanted to get another cushy job in term two.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Some of these that are getting a little more obscure,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the Bigelow guy you mentioned, the hotel. I mean, if you were gonna be able to pull that off, a space hotel, you'd probably want to be in tight with the leading, space transport,
Mm-hmm.
avenue, which
Yep.
would be, I believe SpaceX is the leading, right? It's the one that
Yeah.
essentially replaced our shuttle program for all practical purposes,
Yeah, I think
right?
so. Yeah. Yeah. So that seems to be at least the most obvious theory there. Then you start getting into some of the smaller, I say smaller, but under sub $10 million range. And I'm not going to go through all these, but Energy Transfer LP, which is primarily Sunoco. So, of course, that makes sense. Oil and gas industry donating a lot to Trump. The U-Lines, which own the U-Line Shipping Supply Company, they donated $10 million. ABC Supply Company, which I already mentioned, that's part of Diane Hendricks' empire, donated $10 million. And then there's a couple down here at the towards the bottom of the list that I've found to be pretty interesting. One was Andreessen Horowitz. They donated $7 million. They're a Silicon Valley VC firm with big ties to crypto and blockchain investments. They also donated $44 million to a pro crypto PAC, which is called Fair Shake PAC, and that doesn't have a political affiliation, but is definitely pro crypto. And Andreessen Horowitz has promoted crypto and blockchain technologies pretty heavily for years now. And so I'm wondering there if, for one, that's signals part of the shift of, I think, a lot of Silicon Valley shifting right after, a lot of the opinions that I was seeing was that they were pretty much liberally aligned, so aligned with the Democratic Party, but just didn't feel like they were getting a lot of love, and they felt like that the regulations that were coming in were too heavy from the Democrats. And so then I think they started ideologically shifting to the right, realizing that money is the language that they speak, and everything pretty much being transactional, especially with Trump. So I just feels like they just started aligning themselves more with the right wing, just as a pure survival tactic.
Blank.
Another interesting thing from their perspective might be that they're going for a potential treasury pick. I would not be surprised if Andreessen or Horowitz, that's either Mark Andreessen or Ben Horowitz, would be in line for a potential pick. So again, a lot of money at stake there. Normally, treasury picks come out of Wall Street, not Silicon Valley. But because Trump's all in on crypto now, and he's got Elon as an advisor, and all those guys are tight, fun fact: Andreessen Horowitz manages about 42 billion in assets and investments right now. So that's no small fish right there. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two guys wasn't floated as a potential pick for Treasury.
Yeah, possibly. And when you say there's a pro crypto pack, it's a pro crypto pack, but the pack could donate money anywhere technically. And I just
Mm-hmm.
wonder if it's influence on Trump for his very abrupt change in feelings on crypto in the last year or so.
Yeah, because he was down on Bitcoin. He did not want Bitcoin to mess with the sovereignty of the U.S. dollar, or the whatever the right word is there. But yeah, so that's an interesting one. And then finally, Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a Wall Street financial services firm, whose CEO is Howard Lutnick, and some of you may have or may be familiar with that name. He is pretty much the main transition guy for Trump's team this time around, and he just was announced that as the nomination for Secretary of Commerce. So not only has Lutnick been around Trump for a long time, they're good friends, but Lutnick is also Trump's top donation bundler. So through the firm that he's the CEO of, they donated a bunch, and then also individually, he has bundled a ton of donations for Trump this term and his past terms. So there's, again, another just kind of insider reward for shoveling cash to Trump.
Yeah, not much to say.
Right. So there's that swamp being drained right before our very eyes, right? Okay, so we're going to move on now to discuss some of the initial cabinet picks that Trump has made, and I'm looking at an awesome Politico article where they're basically tracking the picks, and I referenced that a little bit in the Substack article that I wrote recently as well. So kudos to Politico for their insight and the time they take to track this stuff. Right now, there's 15 out of 24 that have been announced, and so that leaves 9 still open. And really, I will say this at the top, and you'll see as we go discuss some of these that it seems like one of the major points with all of these is to break the government, not to actually help the government or the people. These picks are mostly absurd, mostly staffed, or they're mostly being staffed with people that have little to no experience, little to no qualifications in these individual roles. And so I think one of the great examples of that is Pete Hegseth being nominated for the defense secretary position. He's a Fox News morning host and a weekend morning host at that. And yet he's one of those guys that's kind of a Christian nationalist and just a great face. As Trump would say, he's like out of central casting. So he's got the look, he's got the TV props, and I think that's pretty much why Trump picked him. He has no experience running any kind of bureaucracy or major organization. And he's going to be asked to lead the largest bureaucracy in the world.
That's what a lot of the talk is. That's what a lot of the talk is, right? That Trump's picking these people based on like TV appearances and stuff. It's basically, like how do they present? How do they look?
Yeah,
that's not experience.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's a kind of experience.
Well,
but
yeah.
Is that what you? I mean, yeah. Is he? I mean, is part of that like how let's say you remember back when Rumsfeld was doing press briefings, and that guy just seemed like, one, he looked like the crypt keeper, and two, he just seemed so downright evil. Like you almost got the sense that he cheered every time there was collateral damage on the way to securing massive oil fields in Iraq and stuff like that back in the Iraq War, early days of that. And so if he knows that the shit's going to hit the fan and he's going to have to trot out some of these people to be on TV to defend his like outrageous policies and his extra governmental actions and crazy executive orders, maybe that's where his head's at. His head is like not the damage that's going to be done, but the damage control that his people are going to have to do on his behalf.
Who can make the sales pitch better? Essentially,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Who can eat that shit sandwich but still look good doing it?
I think the other key thing, and I know you've only mentioned one name so far, is they're all, as far as I can tell, just diehard Trump loyalists and people that won't push back. And see, I think that's part of the problem is in Trump's mind, he's running everything. He needs the people who are going to carry his wishes down through these other, offices and these other positions. It's not about their ability to do their job. It's about their willingness and loyalty to do exactly what he says should be done. because nobody's smarter than him. I mean, his uncle went to worked at MIT or whatever. I mean, right there. I mean,
The genes,
smartest
the
dude alive.
genes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I mean, so it's more like he's just looking for people that can communicate effectively what his harebrained ideas are, and to make sure that they praise him while they do it. I think that's, like you said, I mean, I think that's pretty much the main qualifications, right? Is being a pure sycophant and then having some sort of look and way about them, and having proved themselves loyal with many appearances over the years. So think about another one would be Tulsi Gabbard, being the director of national intelligence, which, I mean, she's like a former Democrat, right?
Just a few
Huge,
years ago, had a lot of
just
stuff
a
to say about Trump.
few years.
Just
Yeah.
like what's his name, JD Vance did.
Vance. Yeah.
Just like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now is basically a Russia suck up, pro Putin, just spits out Russian propaganda talking points left and right. And with someone like that as the head of the intelligence infrastructure in this country, like, there's some serious implications to that. And I'm no expert in that field by any means, but just think about how our allies are going to feel sharing critical intelligence at that level when they've got someone who they know is a pro Putin sympathizer at the top of that organization. Like, that's, and then the good people in those various agencies that are just going to quit, that they're not even going to deal with that because they just don't feel like that's a smart, prudent pick. And so they don't want to work for her because it would be a disaster. So that could have a lot of implications right off the bat. And we're talking national security implications, which is pretty serious stuff. So,
Yeah, there's something about the fact, like, Trump seems to really like, and I'm just making an observation here. I think that the only thing he seems to like more than people who have been loyal to him from the beginning is those people he was able to somehow convert, like JD Vance, Tulsi Gabbard. Like, if you came around and now all of a sudden you're a fan, he seems to like that in some way,
yeah.
right? That he like won you over,
Yeah. He conquered you somehow. Yeah. And then so we have Elise Stefanik as the UN ambassador. Again, no more fine example of a Trump loyalist there. Another big one, of course, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being nominated for Secretary of HHS, which is just bonkers. I mean, the dude is straight up a conspiracy theorist and an anti-vaxxer and has no public health experience whatsoever, and is basically like, I have to go. I listened to it a long time ago, and I'll have to, or some of his other stuff, but I'll have to go back and listen to the episodes that the Behind the Bastards podcast did on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But apparently that's a really revealing series they did on him, and how he's just a train wreck of a person. and I think there's a reason why his family has basically disowned him for all intents and purposes. So that's just a really scary pick right there, being in charge of the health apparatus, the public health and safety apparatus in this country. Clearly unqualified and dangerous.
In the spirit of even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while, he does say a few things, and I mean like a few, around health things that I do agree with. You know what I mean? Get pesticide, get some of the pesticides out of food, get some of the some of those things. But then
it's the chemicals and ingredients that Europe doesn't have that we have, that we allow this extra stuff that's not good for you.
A lot of plastic contamination and exposure to plastics in food and stuff. Man, it's a small list in the grand scheme of a lot of the things he thinks believes. But so, like, I just, to be clear, like, there are some things I can get on board with there, but not most of it. And again, the inexperience factor and just the like, I think you said like batshit crazy aspect. Yeah, not qualified for the big.
No, not really. I mean, maybe not going with a guy who has a brain worm and cut off the head of a whale and drove on the highway with a whale head on top of your minivan. Maybe that's not the guy we want for that job. I don't know. So let's see. Department of Energy, that's a new one. I haven't seen that one yet. That's Chris Wright. And then, so I'm not really so sure about this dude, but I've already started to hear, I've heard some whisperings around that this might be the pick and that is um, not good because he's all about, just sucking up to the oil and gas industry, and he owns or owned a fracking company, I guess. And so where that policy is going to go. And then, of course, one of the biggest ones is Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, which is just a shit show. I mean, we all saw that today the ethics committee decided not to release the report. The Republicans are saying one thing about it. The Democrats are saying, like, hey, this was not any kind of unanimous decision, and we did not decide together to not release the report. It was basically a 5-5 vote. And hopefully the senators that are going to be involved in these confirmation hearings will either have the FBI get involved directly and do the background checks and the investigations that they should do, or they'll release that report or it'll be leaked and we'll get the information. But I mean, I basically heard the only reason why he didn't get charged with sex trafficking and illegal drug use and sex with a minor is that the witnesses, the two females involved, were basically thought of as not very credible, which is unfortunate because that I think is the only thing that stopped him from being prosecuted for those alleged crimes. So, but again, just woefully unqualified and a sex pest and just an all around asshole, it seems like. I mean, most of his colleagues don't even like him on the Republican side. So for that guy to be in charge of the Department of Justice would be a train wreck.
Well, and he felt like the department, a couple of years back, he felt like the Department of Justice was trying to blackmail him and come after him. I don't know if he really felt that. I saw a couple appearances where he said things like that. So, here's a guy who's maybe potentially has a vendetta against that exact organization, and you're going to put him in charge of it.
Yeah, I heard he wants to get rid of the FBI at the very least.
Well, of course he does. But, the thing, I'm going to come back to the two girls for a second because, I heard something similar and basically I thought what it sounded like it came down to was basically because they became sex workers, when they were over 18, or maybe they were acting that way, but because they were, that takes away some of their credibility to, accuse him of certain actions at any point in time. And it's like, well, that's not how that works, right? Even a sex worker can be raped.
Especially with a minor.
Yeah, well, yeah,
too,
right. Factor in the minor. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those crimes that's either it is or it isn't. So it either happened and the person's a minor and therefore it's a crime, or it just didn't happen. It's got to be one or the other. There should be no other circumstances that play into whether that's a crime has been committed or not. Whether she was being paid and she was a minor or whatever, it doesn't matter. She was a minor, and her testimony says that Gaetz had sex with her, and the other witness said that she observed that sex happening. And so, yeah, it shouldn't matter, unfortunately. But yeah.
Well, I thought the other potential witness in that was I can't remember the guy's name, but it was his friend that got in trouble several years ago when a lot of this stuff first started to come out. The guy that his sort of...
Oh, the guy that pled guilty?
Yeah.
Like Josh, I'm not going to try to remember his name. Yeah, because I don't remember exactly either. But yeah,
I think that was him. But part of the issue was they're saying, well, because he's convicted and in jail, he's considered an untrustworthy person and not a credible witness. But it's like, but that's the guy that was supposedly doing half this stuff with him.
Right.
It seems like you're the most credible witness.
Right. Well, I also heard that there was another female, an 18-year-old female, who was at the party with both
that too
as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
that too.
So yeah. So anyway, just a lot of bad stuff. I mean, and also to go back to Hegseth for a second, there's apparently credible allegations that he roofied and raped somebody, and then entered it into an NDA to keep that quiet. And
it basically paid her to not talk.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then, of course, there's
innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
But also, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Usually, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of this stuff going around in the Trump team. So, and then Robert F. Kennedy Jr., not the most upstanding family values guy either. That's more to come up there, I'm sure. But yeah, all around, just a bunch of picks that seem like they're more designed to just be pretty faces, to try to slap lipstick on a pig when it comes to, defending Trump's wildest wishes and whatever policies they have to push through that he asks them to do.
It's all about loyalty.
Yeah.
It's all about loyalty.
Loyalty and no pushback.
I mean, that's essentially, now I have to say, I never read the book, but Michael Cohen's first book, Disloyal, Trump's former lawyer, first book, Disloyal, and I've heard him, I've listened to enough podcast episodes there that I've heard him say enough that that's essentially what that book was about, is Trump's, demand for undying loyalty, and yet doesn't turn around and show that same loyalty to you when when you need it.
Yeah.
Sure, always claims to not know a lot of people. You know what I mean? Never heard of that guy. Never.
He doesn't know a lot of people, but he also knows all the best people simultaneously. And he only hires the best people until they're not the best people.
As evidenced by this list.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we should leave it there. We covered a lot of those picks. I know we could go a deeper dive into each one of them, but that would take too long. Excuse me. That would take too long to go through. So we'll just leave it there. So as a wrap up, again, we covered a lot of the top donors. Seems like there's a lot of pay to play going on, a lot of corruption still happening, a lot of interests with money, clearly trying to buy influence or policies or positions within the government in a second Trump term. So we'll see how that plays out. And then, when it comes to the cabinet picks, we'll see if he bullies his way through the Senate and gets his wish of trying to do recess appointments so he doesn't actually have to have confirmation hearings on any of these people, or if the Senate holds firm and actually does their advice and consent role as they're constitutionally obligated to do. So we'll see what happens there. But at the end of the day, just a lot of scary stuff so far, and we're still in November. So
you just mentioned the worst part of it, and we probably shouldn't gloss over that, really. So, I mean, let's take a couple more minutes. This whole recess appointment process that he's trying to get in motion, which is to essentially say, we won't go into all the specifics of what that means and how that plays out, but what he's essentially trying to do is not have any of these picks have to go through the normal assessment
confirmation
process. Yeah, thank you. Confirmation process that, would normally happen here, because he might have the Senate votes to get these people through anyway, but that process would be digging up a lot of this dirt that he doesn't want people to know about these people. He wants that whole thing to be avoided and stay in the dark, and that's why the Republicans in the House, his cronies, are saying, yeah, we're not gonna release this ethics investigation report into Matt Gaetz, which is exactly the kind of thing you'd want access to if you were trying to decide whether you should confirm these picks or not. So it's all about keeping. He knows these aren't good picks, from a credibility experience standpoint, like you said. But this is the loyal sycophants that he wants in these positions, and he's going to do everything he can to circumvent the normal checks and balances to make sure that it happens.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part more than anything, because just putting forward terrible picks, if they're going to not get confirmed, is one thing, because there's a lot of speculation. Always putting forward, guys like Matt Gaetz, because that way when he gets turned down, then he can get the next guy in, and it makes the next guy look better. But there's no next guy. This is exactly the kind of Matt Gaetz is exactly the kind of person he wants in that position. Somebody that's going to do his bidding and go after his enemies, and like you said, dismantle the FBI, go after all the forms of checks and balances to Trump's power in a second term. It's scary, man. It's scary, people. I hope you're paying attention, and I hope you're asking yourselves, is this what we wanted out of this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, not to get too much scarier, but I heard there's also a potential process called a concurrent resolution that they could do, where Mike Johnson in the House proposes a concurrent resolution with the Senate to immediately go into recess, both chambers. And in that case, if the House votes for it, but the Senate says, no, we're not going to do that, then because it's a concurrent resolution, it goes to the president to decide. So what do you think President Trump's going to do? Decide to put him into recess. So even if the Senate does have a backbone and decide to stand up for it, there's still potentially a way that they could get around it using just bullshit parliamentary loopholes that who knows why the fuck those are in the system. Like, why create rules if you're just going to have loopholes around it? But apparently that's a thing too. So
yeah, well, there's
keep your eyes peeled for that.
There's a lot of things, some of the explanations I've heard is, this whole recess process was put in place back at a time when it took potentially weeks for some of these Congress people to travel between their home districts and Washington, D.C. And, if everybody's gone and, the Secretary of State dies and you have to appoint a new one, you couldn't necessarily wait 4 weeks for everybody to get back, through one, whatever, picture the farthest away people traveling by horse, you know what I mean? So there was some of these loopholes, but there was also the assumption that, there was a certain level of integrity of the people that would be in office to not exploit these things for nefarious means. But what we have now is someone who's just, the rules, I shouldn't say the rules don't apply. He doesn't want them to apply. Right, but throw off all the, any assumptions about decorum and civility and ethics and morality that would have ever been assumed to be in place, and every loophole is fair game.
Yep. Well, yeah, coming from the guy that tried to overthrow our democracy, you wouldn't really expect.
He's done it once. He's tried it once already.
Yeah.
Now you just gave him the power to really do it.
Yep. Yep. And on that note, all right, yeah, I think that is actually ending. Yeah. We we'll call it a day. Again, thanks everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate all the listens and the support. And if you haven't hit the notification bell or given us a rating yet, we'd really appreciate that. So stay tuned for more cool things to come. We'll try not to dwell on the nasty so much, but we had to go ahead and put this one out. We thought it was good timing to at least get this discussion going before things get too crazy out there. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.